What secrets did Hollywood's brightest stars keep hidden behind the spotlight? Building on the stories from Part 1, we're proud to bring you Part 2 of our journey into the hidden lives of gay icons from Hollywood's golden age. In a world of dazzling fame and strict rules, these men captivated the public while guarding their deepest truths. Today, we lift the veil once again to share their remarkable stories. If Hollywood's golden age had a fairy tale prince, Richard Chamberlain was it. Imagine a perfect jawline, flowing hair, a smile so bright it could melt butter, and a voice that made America swoon. By the early 1960s, he wasn't just a star, he was America's doctor, literally. His breakout role in the hit TV series Dr. Kildare made him a household name. Mothers adored him, daughters swooned, and TV executives treated their ratings like gold bars. But like many fairy tales, there was another story lurking beneath the surface, one that Hollywood wasn't ready to tell. Born in Beverly Hills in 1934, Chamberlain grew up almost in the shadow of the studios. He was athletic, smart, and artistic, the kind of American boy that casting directors dreamed of. After a brief stint on stage and television, his role as the charming young intern James Kildare in 1961 made him an overnight superstar. The show ran for 5 years and made him the first screen god. If Rock Hudson was a movie idol, Chamberlain was the man who brought that beauty into America's living rooms every week. But fame in those days came with strict terms, especially for a young, single, and stunningly handsome man. Hollywood's PR machine was always on the lookout. If you were single, they would pair you up for photo shoots. If you were too secretive about your love life, the tabloids would start speculating. And if you were gay, you just didn't talk about it. Period. Chamberlain, a very private man, knew the rules of the game. Behind closed doors, Chamberlain handled his relationships with men carefully and discreetly. Unlike the tragedy of Ramon Novarro or the public defiance of William Haynes, Richard's story was a quietly orchestrated one. He wasn't trying to change the system. He was trying to survive while still maintaining his career. And honestly, who would have guessed that the man who made teenage girls swoon every week was secretly practicing his lines for a completely different role? America's most private TV star. By the late 1960s and 1970s, Chamberlain had established himself as a serious actor. He moved to England, played Shakespeare, and eventually made a triumphant return to American screens in such magnificent miniseries as Shogun, 1980, and The Thornbirds, 1983. By then, his image had transformed from boyish charm to mature sophistication. But through it all, the truth about himself remained hidden behind the stage curtain. It wasn't until 2003, yes, more than 4 decades after he became a star, that Chamberlain came out as gay in his memoir, Shattered Love. By then, he was 69, and the world had changed. He reflected with startling honesty on the fear that had kept him silent for so long, the fear of losing everything. And make no mistake, in the 1960s, that fear was well-founded. A whisper could sink a career faster than a bad opening weekend. What makes Chamberlain's story so compelling isn't the scandal or the rebellion. It's how perfectly it captures the Hollywood paradox of his time. Here was a man beloved for playing roles that healed people, brought romance and adventure to people, while keeping a vital part of himself private. He was both the hero on screen and the man who quietly protected himself from it all. And through it all, he gave America some of its most memorable performances in television, movies, and miniseries. Chamberlain's talent wasn't an illusion. It was real, but his personal truth lived behind the scenes, waiting for the world to catch up. There's something bittersweet about that, isn't there? Richard Chamberlain didn't live a tragic life. He built a stellar career, loved deeply in private, and ultimately claimed his truth on his own terms. But his journey also reminds us how many Golden Age stars lived in two worlds: the world they performed and the world they actually lived in. If you're ready to continue uncovering the secrets of Hollywood's most memorable men, give this video a like. Trust me, the stories that follow are just as brilliant and just as human. Imagine the perfect 1950s movie star. Blonde hair catching the light, blue eyes making teenagers swoon, and a smile so wholesome it could sell ice cream to a snowman. That was Tab Hunter. He wasn't just a heartthrob, he was the heartthrob, a studio's dream come to life. But beneath the glossy photos and carefully arranged dates with starlets, there was a secret Hollywood was desperate to keep locked away. Born Arthur Andrew Kelm in 1931, Tab Hunter grew up in California, surrounded by horses and open skies. He was a natural athlete, shy, coy, and almost painfully good-looking. So much so that a Hollywood agent spotted him and basically said, "Kid, you belong on a movie screen." With a new name that sounded like it had been tested by a marketing team, Tab was thrown into the spotlight in the early 1950s. It worked. Practically overnight, he became Warner Bros. Golden Boy. He starred in films like Battle Cry, 1955, and Damn Yankees, 1958, and released hit records. His single Young Love knocked Elvis Presley off the charts. Tab wasn't just acting in Hollywood, he was selling Hollywood, the ideal, clean-cut American male. But behind the perfectly staged studio image, Tab's real life told a different story. He was a young gay man navigating one of the most repressive periods in entertainment history. The studio system didn't just manage careers, they micromanaged lives. Dating, arranged. Public appearances, scripted. And private life, monitored like a Cold War operation. One of the most sensational moments of his career came not from a movie, but from the pages of Confidential magazine, the infamous gossip rag that could make or break stars with a single scandal. In 1955, Confidential outed Tab Hunter by publishing details of his arrest at a gay party years earlier. It was the kind of revelation that, for many stars, would have ended everything. But here's where Tab's story gets interesting. Warner Bros. Didn't drop him, they doubled down. The studio went into full damage control, arranging fake romances, most famously with Natalie Wood, to keep his image intact. Tab played along, unwilling to lose the career he'd built, just as Hollywood wasn't ready to admit its golden boy didn't fit the mold. And yet, while the machine tried to control him, Tab quietly built a personal life of his own. He formed lasting relationships behind closed doors, learned to navigate the industry's unspoken rules, and eventually reclaimed his story. Decades later, in his 2005 memoir Tab Hunter Confidential, he wrote with refreshing honesty and even a touch of humor about the absurdity of the double life he was forced to live. The irony? The same image Hollywood tried to protect became the very thing that made his eventual coming out so powerful. When he spoke, people listened, not to a scandal, but to a man who had lived through the pressure cooker of fame and found his voice on his own terms. Tab Hunter's story has everything: the rise of a teen idol, a media scandal, studio manipulation, and ultimately personal triumph. He survived Hollywood's golden age not by defying it loudly, but by enduring it with grace and later telling his truth in his own words. How different might Hollywood's history look if stars like Tab Hunter hadn't been forced to live in the shadows, but had been free to shine exactly as they were? In Hollywood's golden age, image was everything. Square faces, tailored suits, carefully choreographed relationships. Stars were built like movie sets, glamorous on the outside, secretive on the inside. Then came Farley Granger, tall, handsome, a little mischievous, and never one to conform. Granger was discovered by Samuel Goldwyn as a teenager and quickly moved up the studio ladder. He was not a trained actor, but he possessed something Hollywood loved: a natural, youthful charisma. His first big break came in The North Star, 1943, but it was his two collaborations with Alfred Hitchcock that made him unforgettable: Rope, 1948, and Strangers on a Train, 1951. But it wasn't just the regular roles. In Rope, Granger plays one of two highbrow murderers in a film famous for its coded homosexual subtext. Hitchcock, master of suggestion, directed the film with a playful wink to audiences who could read between the lines. And in Strangers on a Train, tennis pro Granger finds himself entangled, literally and figuratively, with a charismatic stranger. The tension between the two men is unmistakable, more charged than most audiences of the time were used to seeing. While many of his contemporaries lived within walls built by their PR teams, Farley took a different path. He never issued a press release about his love life, nor did he hide behind sham marriages or studio-arranged dates. In New York's theater and art world, where he spent much of his time, Granger lived more openly than Hollywood ever allowed. He had meaningful relationships with both men and women, including a long-term partnership with producer Robert Calhoun until Calhoun's death in 2008. What's interesting here is that while Hollywood promoted him as a sensitive, romantic protagonist, Granger was quietly rewriting the script for how a star could live. He didn't shout his truth from the headlines, but he didn't keep it in a safe either. On Broadway and Greenwich Village in the 1950s, everyone knew Farley Granger, and they loved him. He was charming, a little rebellious, and had a presence that made you lean in a little closer. Hollywood wasn't so forgiving. As studios grew uneasy with his refusal to play by their rules, Granger stepped away from the spotlight to focus on the stage, where he could live and perform on his own terms. In his 2007 memoir, Include Me Out, he spoke with warmth and wit about his sexuality, love, and career, quietly challenging Hollywood's expectations. Granger's story doesn't have the tragic endings of some of his contemporaries, nor the explosive public sex scandals of others. Instead, it's about a man who walked the tightrope between Hollywood expectations and his own identity with remarkable balance. He lived an authentically private life long before the industry dared to catch up. What would Hollywood look like if more stars followed Farley's example? Not hiding, not declaring, just being. And while you're thinking about that, tell me, where in the world are you watching this story? Leave your city or country name in the comments below. I'd love to see how far these Golden Age legends reach. If there was ever a man who embodied the all-American leading man of Hollywood's Golden Age, it was Van Johnson. Picture it: strawberry blonde hair, boy-next-door grin, and the kind of effortless charm that made audiences feel like he was personally inviting them to Sunday dinner. MGM built him into the ultimate 1940s dreamboat: reliable, wholesome, and just mischievous enough to keep things interesting. But behind that polished studio image was a story Hollywood preferred to keep tucked away in the cutting room. Born in Newport, Rhode Island in 1916, Johnson wasn't the child of privilege. His father was a plumber, his mother left when he was young, and Van escaped into theater and dance as a way out. He made his way to Broadway, and eventually Hollywood came calling. MGM snapped him up in the early 1940s, and from then on, Van became one of their brightest contract stars. He was the perfect wartime leading man, good-looking, polite, and always ready with a dazzling smile. Movies like 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, 1944, The Human Comedy, 1943, and in The Good Old Summertime, 1949, cemented his image as the guy you could trust, on screen and off. Audiences adored him, studio execs adored him, and gossip columnists, well, they were curious. Because here's the twist. While MGM carefully crafted Van's image as Hollywood's nicest eligible bachelor, his personal life didn't fit the script. Rumors about his sexuality swirled quietly but persistently. He was close friends with openly gay Hollywood figures, and in an era when confirmed bachelor was code for something more, Van Johnson's bachelor lifestyle raised eyebrows. Then came one of the most fascinating studio maneuvers of the era. In 1947, Johnson suddenly married Eve Abbott, the ex-wife of his best friend, actor Keenan Wynn. It was a headline-grabbing wedding that left many insiders whispering. Was it love? Was it convenience? Or was it MGM's way of protecting one of its most bankable stars from unwanted gossip? Hollywood insiders at the time leaned heavily toward the third option. The marriage was brief, and according to Abbott herself in later interviews, arranged to keep his career safe. She once claimed that Louis B. Mayer himself, MGM's legendary and controlling boss, pressured the union to protect Johnson's family man image. Whether or not every detail is true, the result was clear. Van's public persona remained intact, his career soared, and the whispers stayed whispers. Unlike some stars who retreated from the limelight, Johnson leaned into his work. Through the 1950s and 60s, he expanded his career into stage and television, working steadily well into his later years. He never publicly came out, nor did he speak about his private life in detail. But those who knew him knew. In industry circles, his orientation was considered an open secret, carefully managed by one of Hollywood's most powerful studios. Van Johnson's story is a classic Hollywood paradox. The man who made America believe in wholesome, all-American romance may have lived a truth entirely separate from the roles he played. And in many ways, that makes his career even more fascinating. He thrived not through rebellion or tragedy, but by navigating the razor-thin line between personal authenticity and public expectation with the grace of a seasoned performer. It makes you wonder, how many stars built entire careers on images carefully constructed to protect truths the world wasn't ready to accept? If stories like Van's intrigue you, make sure to hit subscribe and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next hidden chapter of Hollywood's golden age. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories alive and shining. The golden age of Hollywood had a patron saint of sophistication, and that man was Clifton Webb. Sharply dressed, razor sharp, with eyebrows arched like cut glass, Webb not only walked into a room, he conquered it. While other leading men were known for their strength and daring, Clifton was also known for his intelligence, wit, and impeccably tailored suits. Born Webb Parmalee Hollenbeck, yes, that was his real name, he was destined to stand out. In his 20s, he reinvented himself as Clifton Webb and conquered Broadway as a singing and dancing man with a sharp sense of humor. Hollywood was calling. When they finally arrived, Webb was in his 50s, an age at which most actors would have been politely turned down. Instead, he became a star. His career began with Laura, 1944, in which he played Waldo Lydecker, a snobbish and witty journalist. One critic called him the first leading man who could knock you out with a single line. The role earned him an Oscar nomination and made him an undeniable box office draw. Audiences loved his precision, elegance, and unabashed sense of superiority. In person, Clifton was equally charismatic. He lived with his mother Mabel all his life. She accompanied him to premieres, dinner parties, interviews, everywhere. Hollywood insiders talked about it constantly, with columnists calling their relationship unbreakable and sometimes surprising. But in the age of coded language, Webb's private life became one of the film industry's worst open secrets. Although he never publicly acknowledged his sexuality, his behavior, his friendships, and his refusal to conform to the studio image made those around him suspicious. Webb didn't care. He didn't marry or engage with the press, a quiet defiance in a town that favored convenient wedding photos. Behind the scenes, studio executives were both excited and scared. Excited because he was making money. Scared because Webb wasn't playing the Hollywood game. In an era when male stars were expected to be unambiguously heterosexual, he stood out like a glass of champagne at a beer party. Still, audiences followed him. Films like Sitting Pretty, 1948, and Cheaper by the Dozen, 1950, made him a household name. Interestingly, while his image exuded an air of high society, Clifton Webb also quietly challenged one of Hollywood's most rigid systems. By never marrying, never bowing to studio pressure, and carving his own path in his 60s, he proved something radical. You don't have to fit into a mold to dominate the spotlight. His elegance masked a subtle rebellion. When journalists tried to pry, Webb had a habit of cutting them off with a sarcastic remark. When asked why he had never married, he simply replied, "I was too busy having fun." That was Clifton. Calm, precise, and never letting anyone else control the conversation. But behind the wit and the tailored tuxedo, his story was both bittersweet. Webb lived in an era when being openly gay was unthinkable. He never came out, and Hollywood, for all its glamour, remained closed. His legacy is both vivid and tinged with what might have been in a freer world. Reaching Clifton Webb's story marks the halfway point of our journey through this hidden chapter of Hollywood. If you've stayed with us this far, thank you. It means you're not just watching, you're truly listening to the whispers of a bygone era. So tell us, out of all the legends we've uncovered so far, whose story has struck the deepest chord with you? Share your thoughts below. We're only halfway there, and the best is still to come. Among the stars of Hollywood's golden age, few shine as brightly or tragically as Rock Hudson. He wasn't just a star, he was the star. Standing 6 feet 3 inches tall, with movie star looks carved from marble and a voice that was just as rich, Hudson was everything America wanted in a leading man. He didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. Women swooned, men envied, studio executives saw dollar signs. From the 1950s to the 1960s, Rock Hudson wasn't just on the big screen, he was the big screen. But behind the carefully constructed image of Hollywood's most desirable bachelor was a man who lived a spotless life. Born Roy Harold Scherer Jr. in 1925, he was a shy Illinois boy who found solace in the magic of cinema. When he arrived in Hollywood after World War II, he was handsome but unpolished. He famously had to shoot 38 takes before he could say his first line. But Universal Pictures saw his potential. They gave him acting lessons, grooming, and perhaps most importantly, a new name, Rock Hudson. The transformation was complete. By the mid-1950s, he was a phenomenon. Films like Magnificent Obsession, 1954, and All That Heaven Allows, 1955, established him as the undisputed king of romantic melodrama. He was nominated for an Oscar for Giant, 1956, along with James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor, cementing his place in Hollywood's elite. Off-screen, he was cast in a different role, that of a straightforward, loyal guy. Publicists carefully paired him with stars for staged photo shoots. The press dubbed him Hollywood's most eligible bachelor. Studio bosses called it a good deal. The truth, of course, was more complicated. Rock was personally gay, and in an era when exposure meant career ruin, he lived very discreetly. Those close to him, close friends and trusted colleagues, knew. Hollywood itself knew, but audiences didn't. and the studio machine worked tirelessly to maintain it. In 1955, faced with growing rumors, Hudson briefly married Phyllis Gates, his agent's secretary. Whether it was a studio strategy or a genuine attempt to live the expected life remains a matter of debate, even decades later. The marriage lasted only 3 years, and after the divorce, Rock returned to a life that was largely his own, but private. He balanced a double life for decades, blockbuster career by day, private truth by night. Friends describe him as kind, gentle, and fiercely loyal, but also under constant pressure to play a role that wasn't entirely his. He wasn't just acting in front of the camera, he was acting off it too. Then came the 1980s. Hudson was a beloved TV star, captivating a new generation through Macmillan and Wife and Dynasty. But his final act changed everything. In 1985, he revealed he was dying of AIDS. At a time when the disease was steeped in stigma and fear, his announcement was shocking. He became the first major Hollywood star to publicly acknowledge both his illness and sexuality, forcing the nation to face what it had long ignored. The man who once epitomized American male idolism became a symbol of something even greater: courage. His decision to speak out publicly late in life changed public perception, raising awareness and humanizing a crisis that too many people would rather keep quiet. Rock Hudson's legacy is about more than romantic close-ups or box office numbers. It's about the price of silence, the burden of expectation, and the power of truth. He navigated a world that admired his image but wasn't ready for his reality. And in doing so, paved the way for others to live better lives of freedom. If Rock Hudson was the Hollywood male heartthrob of the 1950s, Robert Taylor was the first. Before heartthrob became a marketing term, Taylor was the embodiment of it. His perfectly combed black hair, piercing eyes, and jawline so sharp it looked like they had been designed by MGM's art department. When he appeared on screen, audiences didn't just look at him, they fell in love. Born Spangler Arlington Breaux in Nebraska in 1911, he reinvented himself like so many Hollywood legends before him. MGM turned the shy, musical young man into Robert Taylor, a name that graced billboards and newspaper headlines. By the mid-1930s, he was one of the studio's most valuable assets, starring in hits like Magnificent Obsession, 1935, Camille, 1936, opposite Greta Garbo, and then Waterloo Bridge, 1940. He wasn't just famous, he was beloved. The press called him the man with the perfect profile, and audiences agreed. But in an industry built on image, perfection came at a price. Taylor's public persona was precisely constructed: strong but sensitive, romantic but masculine, always the ideal man. MGM relentlessly promoted that image, pairing him with glamorous co-stars and staging off-screen romances for magazines. Every smile in a promotional photo was carefully staged. Every date in the headlines was meant to tell a story. Robert Taylor, the real man. Privately, however, his life was far more complicated. Rumors of his bisexuality had surrounded Taylor for decades, whispered quietly in the industry during his lifetime, and examined more openly by historians after his death. Friends and insiders described discreet homosexual relationships, carefully hidden from public view by MGM's powerful publicity machine. In the 1930s and 1940s, studios had entire departments dedicated to keeping their stars in line with public expectations. And no star was more tightly controlled than Robert Taylor. His story also has a political undertone. In the 1940s, as Hollywood faced the communist scare, Taylor became embroiled in a scandal with the House Un-American Activities Committee, testifying as a friendly witness. Some see it as loyalty, others as fear. Either way, It shows a man acutely aware of the power structures that controlled his world and careful to align himself with them. Then there was his marriage to Barbara Stanwyck. On paper, it was one of Hollywood's most glamorous couples. Tough, intelligent actress and handsome leading man. They married in 1939 and stayed together for more than a decade, becoming one of the industry's power couples. Behind closed doors, however, their relationship was arguably unconventional. Many historians and biographers believe their marriage was more a mutually beneficial one than a traditional romance, allowing both to skirt Hollywood's rigid expectations while maintaining private lives that didn't fit the public mold. What makes the Robert Taylor story so compelling is not scandal, it's subtlety. Unlike Rock Hudson's later public revelation, or Clifton Webb's elegant defiance, Taylor was all in the machine. He played the role with near-perfect precision, fitting into Hollywood's manufactured reality so seamlessly that few dared to question it at the time. His legacy raises difficult questions. How many stars did we never really know? How many lives were edited and rewritten to fit a script written not by the actors themselves, but by the studios that owned them? Robert Taylor's story lingers like a perfectly lit black and white close-up. Beautiful, mysterious, and a little far-fetched. If Hollywood's golden age was a stage where everyone followed the script, Gore Vidal was the man who crumpled it and wrote his own. While others crafted images to survive the spotlight, Vidal looked into the camera, smirked, and said exactly what he thought. He wasn't a matinee idol, a closeted romantic, or a silent survivor. He was a rare public intellectual who challenged Hollywood and America with style. Born into a powerful political family in 1925, Vidal grew up among senators, soldiers, and society elites. But instead of following a privileged path, he dove straight into the cultural bloodstream. By his early 20s, he was already a literary sensation. His third novel, The City and the Pillar, 1948, broke ground by portraying homosexuality as reality, not sin. The reaction was explosive. Critics blacklisted him, major papers refused to review his work for years. Vidal didn't retreat, he sharpened his pen. Hollywood came calling soon after, and Vidal slipped into the industry like a quiet storm. He worked on screenplays for epics like Ben-Hur and Suddenly Last Summer, moving through the studio system like a quiet storm, always inside, but never one of them. He moved among stars, producers, and power brokers, but he was never one of their carefully managed creations. He didn't need to be. Vidal understood something few in Hollywood dared admit, that the real power wasn't in the smile, it was in the story. What made Vidal truly radical wasn't just his talent, it was his refusal to hide. In an era of sham marriages and buried scandals, he spoke openly about his sexuality. He rejected rigid labels, declaring, "There is no such thing as a homosexual or a heterosexual person. Most people are a mixture of impulses." In 1950s America, this wasn't just progressive, it was incendiary. Vidal became a cultural lightning rod. He ran for Congress twice, sparred with powerful figures, and became a TV fixture, skewering opponents with precision. His famous 1968 clash with conservative William F. Buckley Jr. was a defining broadcast moment. Two sharp minds colliding, with Vidal's calm wit pushing Buckley into an on-air outburst he never lived down. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Vidal didn't live in fear of exposure. He lived in defiance of it. He didn't whisper his truth behind studio walls, he proclaimed it on air. He wasn't interested in blending in, he was interested in provoking thought. And in doing so, he became something Hollywood rarely produces. A figure whose power came not from image, but from intellect. Gore Vidal's presence in this lineup might surprise some. He wasn't a leading man, he wasn't playing romantic heroes under the Klieg lights. But his influence on the Golden Age was undeniable. He challenged the industry from within, rewrote narratives others were forced to live by, and gave a voice to ideas America wasn't ready to hear. As we close this chapter on 10 extraordinary men who navigated fame, fear, and forbidden truths, here's our question for you. Which story moved you the most? Which of these legends left the deepest impression? Drop their name in the comments below. We'd love to know who captured your heart. Behind the glitz and glamour, these 10 men carried truths that were too heavy for their time. They shaped the golden age of Hollywood not just with talent, but also with quiet strength, wisdom, and courage. Their stories remind us that history shines brightest where light meets darkness. And this is just the beginning. There are many more hidden chapters to come. Follow us to make sure you don't miss what's coming next.